Welcome to The Bridge. Fun conversations on culture, life, and everything in between.
Welcome to The Bridge. We are a show that connects East and West. My name is Jason. I'm originally from California, but now I'm living in beautiful Wuhan, China. Today with me is Alex.
Hello, everybody. This is Alex Shi. I am from the northeast part of China, and I'm speaking to you from Beijing, China today.
Find us where you get your podcasts. If you like the show, then consider pushing the like button or giving us 5 stars. Suggestions, comments, anything you would like to share, email us at welovethebridge@gmail.com. We love the bridge. Today we have a very special guest, Andy Boreham, a journalist in Shanghai. I want to give a bit of a background. Mr. Boreham, am I saying that correctly?
I guess so. I mean, we don't even know how to say it.
Okay, Mr. Boreham is a New Zealander or Kiwi living in China. He has a triple major in media studies, political science, and Chinese from Victoria University, and a master's degree from Shanghai's Fudan University, a very prestigious Chinese university, in Chinese language and culture. Andy is a journalist and weekly columnist for the Shanghai Daily, the official English language newspaper in Shanghai. He is also the host and creator of Reports on China. Welcome to The Bridge, Andy.
Thank you so much. Good to be here. Hey, that introduction sounds really formal. I hope we can kind of back off from that for the rest.
What I wanted to jump on first, because I think it's really fun for our Chinese listeners, is you studied Chinese for your BA and your MA.
Right. Yeah. That was that happened actually quite by accident, because I initially had 2 majors for my undergraduate. It was political science and media studies. Then I got the opportunity to do an exchange, which was really exciting. So I wanted to come to China, but unfortunately, I couldn't speak Mandarin. So they were like, oh, what do we do? Maybe you could go to Hong Kong. They have some classes in English. I was like, oh, have a look. It was all full. And then the assistant at the university was like, you could just go and do a Mandarin semester and learning Mandarin. I was like, okay, let's try it. Enjoyed it, added it, and now it's like become a huge part of my life, I guess.
I was hoping, my HSK level, firstly, admittedly, is like 4, so it's not very good. You must have a HSK, I guess in the new system's like 7 or 8. So
No.
No?
No, I got to tell you a secret. Actually, my master's was taught in English.
Nice.
When I came to Shanghai to do that, that was 2015, I think. I can't even remember, 2017. My HSK at that point was also level 4, which wasn't enough to do a master's in actual Chinese. So that master's was taught in English. And I kind of, ever since then, I've been working really hard to improve. But in terms of the new HSK levels, I think it goes up to 9 or something.
Yeah.
I didn't even attempt it. Like I did 5, and then I heard level 6 back when they had up to level 6 is really, really difficult, and I haven't tried it.
We have a lot of listeners in China also, and I was wondering if you could say something that would show our Chinese listeners that, maybe a joke or just like, I don't know, some bit of something that I probably wouldn't be able to say or understand.
Why don't I do it in Shanghainese?
That sounds really fun.
Oh, then I could guess too.
Okay.
That I could take part as well.
But you have to know first that Shanghai, has Shanghainese. It's the local dialect, but there's also so many different versions. So the one I've learned, I learned how to introduce myself, goes something like this. And actually, if you're a Mandarin speaker, there's parts you can understand, because Shanghainese, a lot of it, especially for young people today, it has pieces of Mandarin, pieces of English. So here we go.
I've heard that before.
大家好，我叫Udi，是从新西蘭嚟啊。我在上海雜報工作，嚟上海7年啦。我話得會得講上海話，嗰個我老歡喜嗰個樣子。
So Alex, what does this mean? Oh, you got her.
But I have to say, it's not like, honestly, I did a video on Shanghainese and I learned that introduction. But when I say it to different people, they're like, that's not what we sound like. Or some people will say, wow, you sound a lot like someone from Chongming Island.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's not very Belgian.
I got that you're living in Shanghai, or you're working in Shanghai. You've been in Shanghai for 7 years, and my name is Andy.
Right.
That's about it. I didn't get anything else.
It was very fast.
I'll walk you through some. So, a lot of it sort of sounds like Mandarin. Like if you say 7年啦, 7 years, you just say 7年啦.
Yeah.
And it kind of sounds like 7 years. That's probably why you picked it up.
Yeah.
But also we say,
I learned to speak Shanghainese. No?
The last bit? Well, the first word and the last word you got. It's like, so 我 is 我
Yeah.
我大为的讲上海话我不太会讲上海话 Vada is like 不太会 vada.
Like I know a little bit, but not too much.
Right.
Oh, yeah. 2,500 years ago, an old man rode on his buffalo and headed west of China. Before he vanished into the wild, he left behind a book of 5,000 words, which for the next 2.5 millennia would have shaped the Chinese way of thinking. Subscribe to the Sayings of Lao Tzu and find out why generals with wisdom yield after winning the ultimate battle, and how staying behind just might help you get ahead of others. The Sayings of Lao Tzu is available on all major podcast platforms.
You're listening to The Bridge.
I don't want to go too deep into Mandarin and Shanghainese because a lot of our listeners are also in North America and they're probably like, what are you guys talking about? So
Weirdos.
I mean, it's just probably off-putting for someone who doesn't already speak Mandarin a little bit. But I wanted to ask you, Andy, since you have been living in China for 7 years, what originally brought you over?
Actually, I've been in Shanghai 7 years. Oh, actually, no. It's longer than that. See, this is why, you can kind of see my Shanghainese isn't that great, because that's the introduction I learnt 2 years ago. So now
And you spent 2 years perfecting it.
It's right. So now it's 9 years or nearly 10 years, I think, in China in total. I came initially for that semester doing Mandarin Chinese. That was in Shanghai. But I've also done a semester at Tianjin University up in Tianjin, a semester in Yunnan University in Kunming City. And then I did my master's at Fudan. So a lot of different experience from kind of north, mid and southern China, but there's a lot more.
So originally you were thinking about studying Chinese culture and language. That our story started, preceded that. Why were you interested in coming to live in China and study?
I guess I've always been really interested in Asian cultures for some reason, particularly East Asian, but I also spent some time volunteering like in Cambodia, Thailand, those places, although I really love their culture, it's just too hot all year round. So
I thought you were going to say something that is super profound.
Something more meaningful. No.
They're just too hot.
I really love the kind of collective culture. Also, I find Asian countries, the ones I've visited, to be very very happening. There's a lot happening. After that, I visited China for the first time 12 years ago for a holiday. And that was actually to Nanning in Guangxi province and then to Guangzhou. And it was winter. And I was like, what? There's an Asian place that's not hot? And I was like, wow, I love this place. So then when I got the chance to do exchange, I really wanted to come to China. Always been really interested in China's long culture. I find it fascinating because it's just so different.
Yeah.
Everything about China is so different to New Zealand. So after I came and did that semester learning Mandarin, I just got hooked, I guess. And that kind of became the direction of my life after that.
Well, your undergraduate third major. Well, firstly, I've never actually heard of anyone with a triple major.
It's not that hard.
Bragging, man.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds hard to the rest of us. Throwing 20 or 30 extra units on. I don't know if that's how you guys counted in New Zealand, but like you may be a bit of an outlier. But what were your perceptions of China before you came to China versus how you found China to be in person?
Absolutely, completely different. I think I was a victim of Western media representations of China, I guess. So when I first came to China on that trip 12 years ago, we took a bus from Hanoi in Vietnam all the way to Nanning in Guangxi. And we were like expecting it to be like dirty, depressing, grey. Honestly, every bad thing you could imagine, that's what we were expecting. And then most of the trip was kind of over mountains and we couldn't see much. And we were like, wow, this is so, the Western media love to use the word draconian when they describe China. That's what we felt. Like we were like, oh, this is so exciting. It's like, heading into a forbidden land. It's so scary. But then when we got to Nanning, it was like so clean and beautiful and modern. The people were so friendly. And we were like, this is like, I just felt like I'd been hoodwinked, I guess. And from then on, I was just like, I had to find out more. So, we took a train on that trip as well to Guangzhou. It was just amazing. So absolutely completely different. If you just get your understanding of China from Western media or Western movies, you don't know China, really. You have to come.
So, one of the reasons I invited you on, because you're very popular online with talking about what China is really like. You did media studies since undergraduate, and you were a journalist here in China. I want to read something I saw on Twitter recently. A bunch of people were arguing about something pertaining to Chinese culture, and someone, Colin TTWSYF, said, I doubt it. Maybe Andy BXXX can confirm it. So when people they're not actually sure if something's true about China, they actually look to you to confirm, is this something that is actually true? Because people look to you as someone who is legitimately a media representative of media in China who actually knows how things are going.
Well, it's kind of a double-sided there. I think it's really, I feel honored that they would turn to me for help debunking something or confirming or denying something. But at the same time, I kind of feel like it would be so much better to ask a Chinese person, to be honest. I just really feel like, looking at reality, this is the way the world is. A lot of people believe a foreigner more than they might believe a Chinese person. But I really wish that would change. I do feel really, really honored that they will do that. And at times, sometimes I haven't seen that message, but sometimes I'll see them and I'll try to help them out. But really, I really wish, and there's a lot of Chinese people on Twitter who they could turn to. I wish they would ask them, to be honest.
That's a really good point, actually. So you studied media, and then you studied Chinese language and culture, and now you do media. You're a journalist here in China. How did that work out?
Actually, I've always obviously had a real interest in media ever since I was a little kid. When I was really, really young, I started a street newspaper.
Oh, yeah.
Using a little printer, printing out headlines and stuff. It was quite scandalous.
Wow.
Sometimes even the police were called sometimes.
Wow.
So I was at 10 or 11, and there was one instance where one of the fathers on the street threatened one of the kids. So I did a story, a big expose, and I was like, we can't confirm who it is, blah, blah, blah. People freaked out. It was
wow,
a huge scandal. So I've always
and you had the journalism integrity as a kid without even learning about it in J school.
Honestly, I loved it. And then at school as well, in primary school, we used to have, the annual school elections. I never ran for office. I always ran the school newspaper. So we would do little collage with stories and then photocopy it. It was always really exciting. Then I started, when I was about 12 or 13, I bought my first video camera, and I would make movies all the time. Then I started my own TV channel. I had a little video sender that I broadcast around my street. So I've always been really interested in media.
Is there a reason? What affected you as a young boy to be really interested in media so much that you were into media at 10?
I'm really not sure. I can't put my finger on it. I guess I'll have to go see a counselor and try and figure it out. But it's just always been there. I can't remember what the seed was, what started it.
Do your parents love watching the news?
No, they don't actually, which is really weird. They loved...
It's just going to be one of the mysteries.
Yeah. When I was little, on the weekend, my family just loved renting videos, closing the curtains, eating popcorn, and I was never there. I was always outside making things, doing videos. So it's just always been there. Then when I came to do my master's, I really wanted to get involved in Chinese media, basically out of curiosity, because I knew, there's so much I had been told about China that was wrong. And one of the main ones is media. People will tell you such, awful things about Chinese media. And I just had to find out myself. So first off, I did an internship at Sixth Tone for a summer. Yeah. And then after that, Shanghai Daily. Then it was really interesting, actually. They gave me a column at Shanghai Daily while I was still an intern, which was really awesome, a weekly column. And then when I graduated, they offered me a job. So that's where I am today.
So is the reason that you're staying in Shanghai because you found a job in Shanghai? Or
yes.
Do you like Shanghai versus other major cities in China?
I really like Shanghai. It's an awesome place. Very convenient, very international, very forward thinking, but
waiting for that.
Well, it's not really about that. It's just, I think I'm definitely interested in the future moving somewhere else. When I first graduated from Fudan, I really wanted to move to Beijing. And I was in the process of applying for a job at CGTN, actually. Because of personal reasons, I was kind of doubting it. And then I chatted to the guy who was in charge of recruitment. And he said, the whole process is really long. And if you pull out at the end, if you get offered a job and then pull out, it's not going to look good. So if you're not sure, just wait a while. So I pulled out before I, even started. And since then I've been in Shanghai Daily. But I think, my situation at Shanghai Daily is so free. I have freedom to do my own content. I'm really well supported. I just don't know if that kind of freedom would exist in Beijing, although I definitely want to end up there later on.
Most of the shows that I put together, and I mean like 99% of the stuff we talk about on this show, it's my idea. I'm the one who does the research. I create all the bullet points. So,
It's curated by Jason. Yeah.
You know, that's really great to hear that you have the So what kind of stories do you typically, or maybe it's totally different all the time. What kind of stories do you bring to your readers for your daily column or your weekly column?
Weekly column. Actually, that's slowed down a bit lately because I've been concentrating on video, but normally it would just be to do with cultural, contemporary cultural issues, internet, media, things like that. But ever since I started doing reports on China more full-time with Shanghai Daily, I kind of do columns more sporadically at the moment. And the interesting thing is, my content, my series Reports on China, which I mainly is targeted to foreigners overseas, a lot of my editors think it's too political, which is funny because it completely supports China and tries to debunk Western media fallacies, I guess, about China. But I think it's quite interesting probably for your listeners as well that they may think that I'm being pushed to do this kind of content, but actually my bosses would rather I didn't, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Wow, it's actually really interesting. So really quickly, why don't you broadcast yourself? Where can we find the video that you create, Reports on China?
Actually, I post everything on my YouTube, which I started really concentrating on towards the end of last year. It's called Reports on China. So you could just search Reports on China or type youtube.com/reports on China. And I also spend a lot of time on Twitter lately as well. And that's at AndyBXXX. I'm also on all the, most of the Chinese video apps like Bilibili, Toutiao, Douyin, Kuaishou.
Yeah. I spread out across those two a bit. But I saw one of your posts about having 100,000 fans on Bilibili. I think I'm only 10,000 fans on Bilibili.
Oh, wow. You guys are...
Oh, it's so slow. Yeah. Honestly, keep going. But it just doesn't happen fast, especially I found if you... Because we went to the Bilibili office actually this week for a meeting with their crew to talk about, improving our content to more target Bilibili's audience, but they're really, really young. They're like 87% are under 25. So I think it's really tough, especially for people like us who do like news, politics. Kids, unfortunately, don't really want to watch it.
I mean, if you're fun and the content is something that they could at least understand a little bit, I'm sure it'll...
There's a niche.
Because Bilibili does the support thing. Yeah.
I arrived in Beijing in 2012 and I spent 9 years there. So I'm curious a little bit, and Alex is obviously living there now. So I'm curious a little bit, why are you interested in living in Beijing?
Mainly because it's the political and media center of China. Shanghai is more, and don't get me wrong, I love Shanghai, but it's more like economy, fashion, banking, things like that, which is all stuff I'm not interested in, to be honest. But Beijing, for me, it feels like, it's definitely like, especially with someone working in media, if you want to progress, really the only place I could go after Shanghai is Beijing. And also I'm just really interested in political culture and news and things like that, which is definitely Beijing.
I'm not actually that interested in politics personally. I am interested in culture, and that's one of the reasons I really like Beijing. There's nonstop culture in your face everywhere you go, wherever you turn. There are museums and just like buildings that are thousands of years old. It's a remarkable place for that reason. I wanted to ask you, what can you tell us about life in China versus like what maybe I want to say English speakers, but also maybe just like Westerners think about like what life is like in China?
Again, like I said before, if you've never been here, if you understand China through media representations, through movies, it's absolutely not anything that you think it is. Like, people also, I mean, one of the big problems is people think that, Chinese people are like this monolith, this one group with one opinion who listens to the government. Like, it's absolutely not true. Like, people here are just as passionate. Everyone has their own passions, their different beliefs, their different views.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, completely different to what you might believe. So what I would say to people if they really want to understand China more is get to know Chinese people. Like there's Chinese people all over the world. It's really easy to make friends with Chinese people. And also, unfortunately, we have coronavirus at the moment and China's, with the zero COVID policy, it's not easy to come here. But if you do get a chance, just visit. And I think most people
That's a great idea.
will fall in love.
About you specifically, what kind of food do you like in China? Because there's obviously a huge variety of kinds of food. Yeah. Yeah, more food.
We always love talking about food. We're always
food.
talking
It's
about
like in Shanghai or in China generally, what kind of food do you like that is, local?
I really love xiang cai, which is like from Hunan.
Wow.
Chuan cai from Sichuan province, spicy food. Guizhou also has a lot of really yummy, like sour, spicy food. I love a lot of the different foods from Yunnan province because there's so many ethnic minorities down there with so many different kinds of food. It's really delicious. And also another one I really found out recently that I really, really like is food from Guangxi.
Yes.
I don't like that. What's it called? The dish with
酸野.
No, the one with snails in it.
snails, 螺蛳粉.
什么螺蛳粉?
The river snail noodles. The river snail stinky noodles.
Yes, it's just like, it's gross. It smells. But
It tastes amazing.
Everything with stinky in it. Yeah, like stinky tofu. I'm not, I haven't even tried it. In 10 years of living in China, I have not tried it because I can't get past the smell.
I'll make it happen.
what about pidan?
No, you will not.
1,000-year eggs or whatever it is that I can't do that either.
They're kind of bland. And they're just like eggs, kind of gelatiny eggs, kind of.
I guess I don't like the way it looks. I went for dinner with a friend last night. We had Guizhou food and he ordered that. And I was like, I'll try it. I didn't.
You have to look beyond the look and go to its core of existence.
That's what people say about
Yeah, sometimes you just do. I had a cicada, which is a kind of insect in Beijing. It's like roasted cicada. It is delicious.
Fried, right? Not or roasted.
My cats love cicadas. I remember in New Zealand, I used to catch them. You can grab them by the wings and they can't get away. That sounds really mean. But
How big are they in New Zealand
In
for
New
you to
Zealand,
be able to grab them by the wings?
they're not that big. They're maybe 4 centimeters long, 4 or 5, smaller than here. But also I remember in summer in New Zealand, walking home from school, there'd be all these dead cicadas like just stuck to the trees, and I'd grab like a handful and bring them home. My cats would love them.
Wow. That's really nice that you used to live in the Shire. New Zealand is full of like nature and like beautiful parks, mountains, and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I say, when I tell people I'm from New Zealand, they're like, "Well, that's so beautiful." I'm like, 好山好水好无聊. A lot of nice mountains, nice water, very boring.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of people who like nature, like hiking, like that kind of stuff. Maybe, New Zealand is
It's good.
It's heaven on earth.
And also, if you want to retire, that's really good too.
That's a good place. That's a good place to go.
Go to New Zealand. But I find it interesting because a lot of Chinese people are like, why do you live here? Like New Zealand's so beautiful. And I'm always like, actually, it is beautiful. Yes, but there's just not much to do. And then afterwards, like some of them will like study in New Zealand or something. And then they'll come back years later and be like, you're right. It's so boring.
Wow. That sounds like they need to get some entertainment venues.
I think so.
In terms of culture, like maybe what I mean by culture is traditional kind of Chinese cultures. What kind of aspects of Chinese culture are you interested in or find fascinating?
Traditional Chinese culture. Actually, I'm not that interested in it, to be honest. I can't understand it.
Yeah.
I know China has like a very long history, 5,000 years. I know, some of the dynasties were, lauded, like people thought they were really amazing, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of, like in Shanghai, we have a lot of that culture as well, like the opera and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It sounds really bad, but I'm just not interested.
What about architecture? Like the old Taoist temples, Buddhist temples, that kind of style?
I like going, like if I visit a place and they have, kind of old, 1,000-year-old monasteries or whatever to go look at, I'll definitely go and have a look. And it's beautiful. But I just don't, and I don't know, I just can't comprehend such long history. So even when I was studying Chinese language and culture.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, I was interested in kind of modern, more contemporary. So maybe from, I don't know, maybe from the Opium War forward is kind of what I'm more interested in.
Yep.
But of course, it's amazing, it's beautiful. And I do try to understand very, very general ideas like, this era brought this kind of understanding, this era brought this kind of understanding. But in terms of the details, like who was the emperor, blah, blah, blah. I have no idea.
I have no idea too. And I just like, I've been to Beijing Opera. I don't understand really what they're about, but I appreciate like, the dancing and the music and things like that. What do you do for fun in Shanghai? What kind of hobbies? What are you interested in? What, moves you? What do you do when you're not a journalist?
I love walking. I love eating. I love traveling. So whenever I can, I like to get out of Shanghai. Also China as well, but China has a lot of places to visit. That's really amazing.
It's massive.
But I do, at the moment, since early last year, I find myself working way too much. So I've kind of forgotten what I do in my spare time, apart from work. But I do love to walk. I love to eat. I love to meet friends. I'm not really into movies. Travel, I really love. Just very simple stuff. Very simple stuff.
What are some of the cities that you have that have amazed you inside of China?
I think my favorite city in China is Chongqing. It's so beautiful, like mountains. I've been a few times, and every time I go is in winter because I just can't stand the heat. But it's always like really foggy. You can walk up these mountains. They're like winding streets and get lost. Like, in Wellington, where I'm from in New Zealand, we have a similar kind of topography, but we have like little, 2-bedroom houses on the hills. But in Chongqing, you walk around and it feels like you're in like a really small place in the middle of nowhere, but you'll turn a corner and there's like these huge apartment buildings jutting out of the trees. It's just amazing. Like you can get lost in Chongqing.
Because there's so much
and the food,
vertical variations there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like honestly, you'll walk along a street and then you'll like look beside you. Suddenly a building will pop up, and if you look down, even though you're on the street level, it goes down like 10 floors down the mountain. Like it's just, I find it absolutely beautiful, fascinating. The people are really nice, and the food, obviously. Really good spicy hot pot.
Yeah, I was gonna just out of curiosity, can you actually stand the Chongqing spicy?
I do it, but I really love the taste of it. My mouth loves it, but my stomach doesn't. So afterwards, I have a bit of problem, but I do try to push myself through it because it is amazing. I find, what's that one? It's called jiu. There's like 9 parts.
So
anyway,
the hot pot where they divide the pot into 9 sections.
Right. And it's so spicy. But
that one is I can't do it. I recently discovered that people started labeling how spicy their food is in a different system. It goes from mild to medium spicy to extra spicy to Chongqing spicy.
Exactly. But also the smell of it, like I just love it. Like during the lockdown here in Shanghai, I have some Chongqing hot pot base at home. And when you put it together, you put it in the pot and it starts melting. Like that smell, when it comes up, it just brings me back to Chongqing. It's amazing.
Wow.
You're obviously very interested in journalism. You've been interested in it since you were young. Well, who are some of the journalists who inspire you, who you look to?
Actually, unfortunately, there are less and less now because I really feel like, especially in the West and especially since I moved to China, so many journalists that I liked before are kind of, I don't know, drinking the Kool-Aid. They just buy really quickly any negative news they hear about China. I love
that expression.
It's just terrible. So lately I've more been gravitating to like YouTubers, independent media people, like in terms of China. There's people like Daniel Dumbrill. He's really good. Byron Berletic. Also, Chinese journalists like Li Jingjing. I don't know if you guys know her. She's really good.
I'm in the same dance studio with her.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, my God, she's so cool. I feel like, I guess in terms of Chinese journalists as well, I gravitate more to the ones who are doing similar work to me, which is trying to tell the real China to the world. Also in Shanghai Daily where I work, there's some amazing journalists. I don't know if they'll want me to name them, but for example, Yao Mingji, Yang Jian, just really amazing, passionate journalists. That's kind of who I gravitate to now because I'm spending a lot of time trying to, I guess, debunk or fight against imperialism, Western imperialism in some way. So that's kind of what I gravitate towards.
Misinformation, disinformation.
It's a grand cause.
Right. It's tough, but there's a lot of great people.
You mentioned earlier that seeing is believing, that coming to China would be a great opportunity for people to better understand China. Unfortunately, that's not a realistic expectation for many millions of people because of, their financial situations or all kinds of other reasons that we can't, imagine. If you could tell people outside of China China, one or two simple things for them to take away from today's conversation that you see in China that is different from how it's represented outside of China, what would you tell them?
Probably one of the most important ones would be, like I said before, that Chinese people are so varied. Like, it's not just a group of people that are called Chinese. Like, there's 56 ethnic groups. You have Han Chinese, who are the main group. And even within each group, obviously people have their own opinion. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about China is Chinese people, that they're timid, they have no opinions of their own, they listen to the government all the time, do what they're told. That is absolutely completely far from the reality. So, Chinese people are just absolutely not a monolith. That would probably be the first thing. And the second one is kind of already in your question, but it's that if you've never been to China and you're getting all your understanding of China from the Western media, you really don't know the real China. And that is, hand on heart, absolutely true. It sounds a bit like a cliche, like some people might be like, of course you'd say that, I can't visit China, the COVID, there's a lockdown, blah, blah, blah. But it's absolutely true. I think most people who come to China leave after their first time saying, that is absolutely nothing like I believed or nothing like I expected. Yeah. I think, no matter how much of a cliche it sounds like, you really need to visit. But if you can't, like I said before as well, just make some Chinese friends wherever you are. Chinese people are everywhere. It's not hard, I think. But yeah, basically, it sounds rude, but I would tell them, everything you think about China is probably wrong.
Which is probably true a lot of the times.
I think definitely.
Alex, you are a Chinese person and you lived in the United States. Would you say that like second and third generation diaspora are even remotely what are the cultural similarities and dissimilarities with people who were born and raised in China that you've noticed?
This is a funny anecdote from my parents when I was studying in the US. And of course, they were already worried about my, marital status when I was there. And they were like, you're in the US and you should probably find, they call Asian Americans ABCs, like Chinese American ABCs. You should find an ABC because you guys have so much in common. I was like, honestly, actually, if they are American Chinese person who's not first generation, their value sometimes really doesn't align with our value when it's not about who's right or wrong. Their family might still eat the same kind of food or they might celebrate the same holidays, but the values are not the same anymore because they live in a different society. It's very hard to keep what you believe in, keep believing in what you believed in before when you're living in a completely different social economical system. And with I know that a lot of we talked about the celebration of Chinese New Year and other traditions that are luckily kept among the Chinese American community in the US. But other than that, I feel like if you want to know about China, because a lot of younger Chinese American kids, they probably haven't had the chance to really live in China, to experience China and really try to be part of what it is because a lot of them, if they grow up in the States and they come back or Australia, anywhere that is not their where their parents come from, when they come back, they still look at it. They still look at everything from sort of a visitor's perspective. So not a lot of things line up, actually, at least for me. And that's my experience when I was in the States. You might be better off even asking kids, international kids who go to school here, who live here. They probably have a much better understanding because this is where they grew up. A lot of things you can't really tell or judge if you're not living it on a day-to-day basis.
Well, can I problematize that a little bit? I don't mean to be disagreeable, but I mean, one of the things that we've highlighted in previous shows is that there are so many similarities. So people in America, whether they be Chinese descendants or European descendants or whatever, they love their families,
of course.
They work hard. And people in China's mainland and elsewhere, they love their families and they work hard. So what do you mean by the values don't line up? You're talking about nuanced things.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Not core values of a person, but I mean, if you want to Basically what I'm saying is you can't go to like a younger like Chinese American person and asking them about Chinese society, you know, like how are things done there and how are systems, like how do the bank system work, or how do like businesses get their registration and stuff, whatever, you know, like, because people ask those questions and people do think like, oh, you're Chinese, you know everything about China. But I'm like, there's a lot of things that are changing very rapidly, are developing constantly. Unless you live in here, you really don't understand, because people like to take shortcuts. When I was working on my previous job, they're like, oh, 10 things you have to know about a certain country if you want to do businesses. And then where we look at those things, we're like, no, things are not the same anymore. Like you can't just go to shortcuts and ask them like, oh, how things are done. What you do want to do is to ask them about, for example, the history of this country, even the climate situation of the country. Like, what's the weather like there? What do people usually like? How do they go about their whole year? There are things that are factual that become a very important part of why their culture is the way it is. That'll help you understand people a lot better instead of just be like, what is it like there? You know?
Andy, there's obviously Chinese people that live in New Zealand. Is there a large community there? Did you have the chance when you were studying Chinese culture to make a lot of Chinese friends in New Zealand?
Actually, there's a lot of Chinese people in New Zealand that have been there for a long time, like all the way back to the gold rush days. And then there's also Chinese people that have come recently, or foreign students. Thankfully, at our University of Victoria, we have a Confucius Institute. A lot of teachers from the mainland came over. Yeah. So there was a lot of chance to get to know people from China. But, you know, on the question you just asked, Alex, I think it's really hard to view people in two ways, if you know what I mean. Like, I think people, for example, even ABCs, if they grow up in America, I think a lot of people just view them as American, no matter what. It's hard to kind of switch gears. So like I found myself, and this sounds really bad, but even when I was learning Mandarin after I added that as a major, I was more inclined to meet people from China, even if the New Zealand Kiwis, you know, could speak Mandarin, I was kind of like, yeah, but they're New Zealanders, you know what I mean? And it's really quite unfair. So, you know, I was wondering with you, Alex, like, is it hard to straddle two cultures? Because I know a lot of ABCs in the States, they feel like they're not accepted as Americans, and then they come to China.
They're not accepted as
Chinese. Like, how is that true, or how do you deal with that?
It is, for me, it is true. Even if you didn't grow up in the States, even if for us who lived overseas in any country, really, it doesn't have to be just the US. Right. You the premise of you being able to live in another country is that you agree with how that society is functioning. And different countries operate so differently. So you have to kind of agree with two systems. But a lot of us are kind of taught, or we're inclined to believing that, you know, there's only one truth, one way, one right, and everything else is wrong, you know. So when you grow up in a place and you go live in another space that it's, especially when it's like China and America, where people believe, quote unquote, that it's so different, drastically different, you have to convince yourself and you try to understand. For me, that's an experience of opening up your mind to more possibilities, more, you know, alternatives. And it actually helps a lot when you look at different issues. But for people who are living in that life from a day-to-day basis, it was hard. It was hard for a lot of the time when I was in the States, especially when it came to like topics about China, and you're just listening to how people didn't understand. And then as much English as you could speak as a foreigner living in the United States, it feels like you can't get to the core of why people have that misconception of what China is. I have a much easier time trying to explain what my parents didn't understand about America to them in Chinese, and they believe me. But when I was trying to say, No, that's not how it is when people bring up something. And I'm not trying to be, argumentative. I wasn't trying to be like, wasn't trying to battle them about their ideas. But still, people would be like, oh, you say that because you're from there and you want to agree. I'm like, there's a logical explanation, but I can't get behind that. But I do know we wanted to start this a podcast thing when I was in the States. We're going to call it the Inbetweeners because we're kind of like the people that we're caught in between two cultures and we're kind of just dangling in those two spaces. Very, very funny, personal. When I was there, I went to, because we were all trying to hang out with our American friends in the same program. And then they would hear me speak English and they were like, oh, wow, your English is really good. Da, 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 da. 5 minutes in, they kind of just forget, like, you're not a Chinese international student anymore. Like, we're just talking to you. And then they start talking about baseball. They start talking about the politics, whatever Congress, whatever senator, all of these things that I have no background of. And it's all like it's a part of their life and a lot of pop culture references. And I was like, what? Like, huh? Yeah. Yeah, that's a song. Okay, sure. I know that. And then at the same time, my other Chinese friends who were in the same program, Chinese students who came from China, were like, oh, Alex wants to hang out with them because Alex wants to hang out with the Americans, and she enjoys her time being at their parties. So at a certain point, I became the person who's not invited to either party. It was very sad for a moment, but you grew up and you learned to deal with it. And then you found other international friends who are also kind of in the same situation. So we had a tiny model UN that is made of people who go through exactly what you're talking about, Andy. Like, we're kind of caught in between two cultures.
So you were in a kind of expat bubble.
Yeah.
The reverse expat bubble from the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
I think a lot of it, like you said, it really comes down to how you sound with your language. Like, if you have a very native accent, like you don't sound foreign, people will more willingly accept you into their culture, I guess. It's the same, I feel like, with foreigners in China. If they have a really good accent, good fluency, a lot of the time Chinese people, they'll bring their guards down as well in the same way that you just said. So I think people need to work more on accents. You
were very humble at the beginning of our show, Andy. But I know that you've conducted entire interviews and exclusively in Mandarin. So
it's tough. Please don't make me.
No. We don't want to have our listeners too confused. We already showed off your amazing Mandarin and Shanghainese. I just want to mention, that your ability to speak Chinese must enable you to make, a lot of Chinese friends, because some foreigners who come over here, they don't have even HSK3 or HSK4. They just speak like their 100 or 200 words.
Or nothing.
Yeah, or nothing. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Almost nothing. Yeah, exactly. So these people, obviously, almost all of their friends are exclusively either other expats or Chinese who are already fluent in English, which must make it very difficult for them to adapt.
We cuddle them too much.
Yeah, I think so, especially in places like Shanghai. Like, I know that Shanghai has a higher percentage of locals who speak English. So actually, a lot of the foreigners who end up in Shanghai, I think you were quite generous by saying, they have HSK 2 or 3. Actually, most of them have nothing. I think I saw a figure somewhere, I can't find it again, but over 90% of foreigners living in China can't even speak anything. Wow. Yeah. And I think it's disappointing because I really feel like language is like a key to culture. Yes. And I know that's the case, even for Shanghainese here in Shanghai. So in Shanghai Daily, we'll have meetings, and oftentimes, mostly it's in Mandarin, but then it'll switch to Shanghainese, and it's just like a whole different feeling. Like the local people, they just, even though their Mandarin is just, native level, they still prefer to switch to Shanghainese when it comes to, more nuanced topics or things like that. So it's tough. But I think, the first step is just to learn Mandarin. If your listeners are contemplating moving here or learning any Chinese languages, I think Mandarin's the way to go because it definitely has the most support. There's Confucius Institutes all around the world, a lot of material, and also Mandarin is spoken all over China, regardless of what the local dialects are. So that's a really good start.
One of the original reasons that I was interested in your program, you did a YouTube episode, at least one, the one that I saw early on a couple months ago, about China's mission to raise people out of poverty.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a topic that I find really, really interesting. Is a talking point for me when I tell people about China, because like you said earlier, people imagine that China is gray and that it's devoid of any modernity. But the reality is that China is really not only modern, but China has spent an enormous amount of energy and people energy and money to help all of the most disadvantaged people in the country out of absolute poverty, so that absolute poverty in basically 2020, 2021 has basically been virtually eliminated. And I was wondering, based on your seeing is believing in the video, which is the video that I got that from, how would you describe what you've seen as a journalist?
Well, I think, I was blown away. I think one of the first trips I took to view, the poverty alleviation program was to Dongshan People's Autonomous Region in Gansu province. Just amazing, like the amount of work they put into it. And it's not just, I think in English we say, I can't even remember the saying. It's like, give a man a fish he can eat for a day, teach him to fish he can eat for life.
Yeah.
They're not just doing these kind of, token gestures or whatever it is to help people get out of poverty. They're actually really helping them with education, training, and everything like that, so they can continue to, make a great living for themselves. So one of the examples is we went to, Dongshan potatoes are really, really famous, as well as their lamb. But the potatoes are super famous. So we went to pick potatoes, which was my first time doing that. It was really awesome. But they have experts come in to teach the locals how to get a better yield, get a better quality. And they took us to a patch where there was one farm who hadn't yet taken on the poverty alleviation training. And then right next to it was another patch that had been doing the new processes after the training for a year or two. Honestly, the difference was so huge. I can't remember the technical aspects, but there were things they would do technically in terms of pesticides, and then they have like a layer of a black protection layer that they put in for protection from sunburn or something. I can't remember all the details, but basically the yield of potatoes, just this one example, was so much better. And so they're able to really, absolutely pull themselves up from poverty. And I think that was achieved in late 2020. It started about, I think actually they set to remove absolute poverty in 2012, and it started in 2013. But even, the coronavirus outbreak didn't slow it down. So I think China hasn't been given enough credit, really, for what they've achieved. It's really an amazing thing. And I've been to many more places to visit similar programs. Honestly, I was blown away, and it's absolutely amazing.
Well, I actually would like to ask you about those visits too. Could you, because one of the things that I've been reading about is that China used different methods to help people raise themselves out of poverty in different parts of China. It wasn't just like that the central government said, okay, everyone's going to do this, and then just everyone copied some sort of like template.
The precise poverty alleviation program, right? It's like, it's very targeted, and it's very down to what you are going through.
It's based on like the local context. Obviously, the goal is not to have some, fake, everyone has enough money in 2020. Yes, we've achieved it. Yeah. Okay, let's forget about it. It's for life. Like it's continuing. The program is not over. Like, there's still more training. And like you said, it's all based on the local context. So in terms of Dongshan, just one of the examples is potato. There's another one. Their lamb is very famous. They've set up a lot of cooperatives, really increasing the quality of the lamb that comes out of that area. And the people are just doing amazingly well. So it's not some one-size-fits-all Beijing ordered process. It's targeted. And so what happens is people in the different areas are assigned to the different programs based on what their area has. For example, what are they growing? What kind of resources do they have? And then teams are set up to try and get that process going. Obviously, people will also come in from out of the area and live there for a few years to, experts in whatever, area it is based on their context. to help push it forward. So it's a lot of manpower, a lot of planning, and it's definitely not, over. It's ongoing, continually growing.
So do you know if this is linked to either of you? This is a question for both of you. Because after this program, well, I guess it's not finished, but arrived at one of the markers that they were attempting to achieve. There's this new idea of common prosperity. Do either of you know a little bit more about that for our listeners? Because this is a new goal for, I think, 2035, that there will be a common prosperity across the nation. How is this different from the poverty alleviation campaign that preceded it?
I think it would definitely be completely different. I think they'll raise their standards. I'm not sure of the details of that, but I know with this drive, how in 2020 they said we've achieved, we've lifted everyone above absolute poverty. That is, China's measure of poverty. There's a world index of poverty. The Chinese version is a bit different based on local conditions and also what is it?
Purchasing power parity.
Right. It's a little different, but actually they've lifted people above what they call absolute poverty, but that is still not the final goal. Like, it's still not high enough. So I think to be lifted above absolute poverty, you only need to earn, I don't know the exact figure, but it could be like 12,000 yuan per year. So it's still quite low. Yeah. So I imagine what's going to happen is they're going to keep raising the standard and bring China, everyone in China, up to a more prosperous standard. I don't know if you know more, Alex.
Apart from the news from, I think the goal was made 2 years ago. And it's, if you want to look at this, I guess an okay analogy to make is that we're kind of first trying to bring everybody up to speed as much as we can. And then from there on, after we reach the initial goal of the poverty alleviation program, now let's forge on with basically everybody in China. And the key is development and safety from the government's reports. That's kind of the main goal for the 2035 vision.
What I love about China is these long-term plans. Like, it's something, when you have a stable government like China has, we can really go for these long-term plans that look way into the future. In the West, and I'll just talk about New Zealand, we have elections every, I've forgotten now, 3 years. But people just have plans for the 3 years. It's like, we will lower taxes, we will build that bridge. But they can't really afford to have long-term plans, which is something that is very unique about China, which I really love. Like, Shanghai has a plan for 2050, so it's just amazing what stable government can do.
You have piqued my curiosity so much. What is this plan for 2050 in Shanghai?
It's just basically turning Shanghai into, what do they call it? A metropolis with global significance and blah, blah, blah. What's the word? Anyway, they want to make Shanghai, a really key international city. I
thought Shanghai was a key international city.
It is, but they want more. They want more.
More, yeah.
So basically what they're looking for is to, increase, also one of the main points is to increase make people's livelihoods better. So one of the things, and this is all over China now, but this was one of the earlier targets, was to have everything you need in life available within just a 15-minute walk.
That's very cool, actually, because that lowers people's environmental impact.
Exactly. And it's environment is really important. So also another aspect, I don't have the details in front of me, but just from memory, another aspect of the 2050 plan is environmental. Shanghai wants to be one of the key environmental friendly cities in the world. And that involves, like Chongming Island or so many different areas. So there's all these huge plans in place. Next time, we could talk about it for a whole show and I'll bring more details.
I actually would love to have you on the show again in the future. You are, someone that's really exciting, who knows a lot about what's going on. And it would be our pleasure to host you again if you're willing to come on.
Oh, I'd love to.
I'd like to talk a little bit about environmental protection because, you have lived here a long amount of time and so have I. One thing that I've seen visually and smelled, with my nose is like the difference from 10 years ago to now. There used to be Beijing days where, PMI was like 200 and now that's just not the case. Right. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit for our listeners at home, what kind of things you've seen in terms of environmental protection and the improvement of the air quality and things like that.
Wow. Firstly, one of the things your listeners might, already believe is that China is this hugely polluted, disgustingly dirty place. But China's government and China's regional governments are so serious about environmental protection and also removing pollution. Yeah. They really care about the people. Like the amount of pollution that China saw, 10, even 5 years ago was so, it's not good. It's dangerous. It's not good for anybody. Nobody wants that. So like you said, even with Shanghai, the number of clear days now is just so much more than before. And also another important aspect, especially to do with Shanghai, is the Suzhou Creek. That's kind of one of the measures people use to kind of look at how Shanghai is doing. So before, even 10 years ago, there were so many dirty areas. The water was dangerous. Yeah. It's been completely turned around. Even in just the time that I've been here, the waterway has been cleared. I mean, it's seen by many. Waterways are so important. It's kind of an artery for the city. So if you look at pictures of Shanghai historical images, you'll, undoubtedly see images of the Suzhou Creek and the Huangpu River. It was just trash floating on the whole thing. And apparently, I heard that it just smelt like feces, dead animals. It was disgusting. And that has just been so, turned around. That was, 100 years ago. But even, like I said, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's just improved so much since then. So I think China is definitely leading the way in terms of, renewable energies, offshore, environmental protection. Yeah. And there's a lot of data, that you can find online to back that up. It's not, you don't just listen to us.
It's really been a wonderful interview. Thank you for coming on the show, Andy. We are out of time. Listen to our next episode for more insights and be a part of bridging the East and West. Again, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Always loving our guests. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today.